During the 2014 ACE annual meeting in San Diego, we invited former ACE fellows to drop by our booth and tell us the story of their experience in the program. We thoroughly enjoyed our time with them and believe you will enjoy listening to their stories as well.
I learned about the Fellows Program when I was a department chair, and I was at a department chair leadership development workshop, and it was put on by the ACE, and one of the facilitators was an ACE fellow, and she talked about the program, and it sounded really interesting.
Well, for me, the Fellows Program was probably a little bit easier than for some others, as the president of my institution actually had been a fellow a number of years ago, and the dean of my college at the time had been through the Fellows Program. So when I'd learned she'd done that, I actually asked her some questions about what was the purpose of it, why would somebody do it, and what was the real aim of the program?
I actually didn't know about the program until my dean invited me to become a fellow. So she actually even had a little pamphlet in her office, and I looked at it, said, wow, that sounds like an interesting program. And not having been an administrator, it opened up that whole world of the administrative university to me.
Okay, so the Fellows Program was brought to my attention by my former Vice President for Academic Affairs, who himself was a fellow. Shepherd had a fellow 2 years before I was a fellow, and my president was also a fellow. So there's a long history of fellows that preceded me in the program.
Well, I had never heard about the Fellows Program, and my direct boss, who's the dean of the School of Business and Technology, the Walker School at Webster University, came up to me and said, here's something you should consider. And he put a couple of pieces of paper in front of me, and I read up on it, and I looked at it online, and I said, this sounds kind of interesting. And he says, I think this is the next step you need for your career.
I had some colleagues who were former fellows who are now in provost and president's positions in other campuses, and they told me that it was really the best professional development program they had ever gone through.
My mentor, Dr. Stosh Paczewski, was a former fellow, and as it often goes, the fellows say, hey, it's that time for you to take a leap. Would you consider this program and consider developing yourself?
Judy Sakaki, who herself is a former fellow, is Vice President of Student Affairs for the entire University of California. And Judy had strongly encouraged me to apply.
There were couple pieces. One, I had a colleague who was a former president who had been very involved with ACE. And when I met with him to talk about the next steps in my career, he said, you have to check out ACE and you have to check out the Fellows Program. And then I went to a women's leadership program that ACE sponsored, the National Forum, and they talked about the Fellows Program there. So both of those were very good pieces of advice for me. It was really helpful.
My immediate supervisor, Dr. Brenda Valance, was a fellow in 2001, and when I had been a department chair for a while and asked her, what do I do to be you? She said that the ACE Fellows Program was great for her, and she nominated me to the program.
Well, I'd have to say that the whole experience of packing up and moving off to a place where I'd never been and going and trying to fit into a university and learn their culture was just a really wonderful experience. It made me a more flexible human being, I think, and it gave me a lot more patience than I had before. It gave me a real appreciation for different cultural styles, as well as just the different kinds of work that all people do in the university.
There were several. I think the single biggest thing that stood out for me was that there are a number of hot-button issues in higher education that presidents know, that provosts know, that generally do not filter down to the faculty. And so, things like the Goal 2025, the notion of having far more graduates than we have right now. Very few faculty members, department chairs, and even deans, I think, often know about those big issues. Also, some of the top-down view of globalization and being able to actually meet individuals from some of these other institutes from around the world was very important, being able to actually shake their hands, talk with them, and explore those issues in greater depth. And then probably the final thing was getting a little better sense for how the finances of the institution run. Some idea of how a president views the budget, how the vice president for business and finance, etc.
As the perspective of someone from the outside, an observer, you see more things even than some of the people on the campus might see. And the access that you get to the leadership is just incredible. So I traveled to over 50 different institutions around the world, I went in the US, but also Singapore, India, United Arab Emirates, Canada, Mexico, and interviewed presidents, provosts, directors. Also in the United Arab Emirates, we were treated to a dinner with a sultan who actually invited Alice Cooper over, and it was his birthday, so we got to see him perform School's Out for Summer.
Oh, wow.
And so I can't guarantee that all the ACE fellows will have that kind of experience, but we certainly did in our class, and it was pretty amazing.
First and foremost was just how different every institution is. Going on the campus visit, seeing all the different types of institutions and what challenges each president had. Second would be the relationship that the president has with his cabinet or with her cabinet. And finally, all the pressures that not just the president, but members of the executive staff deal with in just the day-to-day operations of an institution. It's much more complex than you would think based on how easy they make it seem.
I wanted to go to, first of all, a public institution because I've been in the privates for over a decade, have not had the experience of a public institution other than attending them in Ohio when I was younger, and I really wanted to see what goes on with public funding. So some real aha moments was getting to go with the president, who I worked with all year. I was right in her office, Joanne Gura, going to legislative sessions with her and watching how she presents to state legislature in Indiana to try to push for more funds, to argue against certain portions of the performance funding formula. That was definitely an interesting part of what I wanted to get, and I would have to say I checked the box off at the end of the year. I had a much broader understanding of public education and some of the issues that they're facing. So that was a real aha moment. Another thing that I really wanted to get some experience around was fundraising, and again, I was very fortunate. I got to Ball State at a time where they were just doing research with an outside organization to see if they had sufficient support to do a campaign. And so I got to see a feasibility study from soup to nuts. I got to see them work with the consultants. I got to see all the background discussions that go on around, you know, how are we going to get this off the ground? What are our goals going to be? What's realistic? What's achievable? Of course, the silent phase, the public phase, the launch, you know, getting all the big donors in for a nice event. So it was really, really wonderful just to get to see how this happens.
There's actually a million of them, but the three biggest, I think, are number one, that I got a much broader understanding of higher education and higher education leadership and the many different roles and the way they interact than I ever could have known before. Secondly, I learned a tremendous amount about myself as a leader. I thought I already knew, but shadowing so many people and going to the different conferences and just being around the phenomenal people I was around really helped me reflect and learn more about myself as a leader. And then thirdly, kind of related to that, I learned that I can do this. I learned that, you know, as wonderful as these presidents were that I got to shadow and spend some time with, I can do this.
Everyone makes mistakes, and when it happens, take time, admit it, learn from your mistakes, and drive on. The second is sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So the fellowship program exposes you to so many different types of institutions, so many different types of campuses, and so many different leadership styles that you learn so much while you're going through it that maybe you didn't even recognize you didn't know. And third, for me personally, I've been working on building an institution in the University System of Georgia, their first four-year public, Georgia Gwinnett College. So many of the lessons learned during the fellowship I've been able to come back and apply and develop our institution, which is a fledgling, now 10,000 students strong.
The fellowship really answered my goals. My goals were to learn more about athletics, undergraduate education, and development and fundraising. And President Shalala made sure that I had experiences with those groups on campus. I spent a week with the development office, a week with athletics, and actually more than a week on undergraduate education with student affairs, and then was very much attached at the hip to President Shalala to learn what it means to be a president and what a day in the life of a president is like. So that was one aspect, was really meeting all my goals. A second that was more of a surprise was learning about facilities management, which I had known nothing about prior to my fellowship. And the third aspect that was very central to actually my learning goals without my knowing it in advance was international travel. So I went to Costa Rica, South Africa, and Puebla, Mexico. And in particular, the trip to South Africa was transformative and life-changing to see how higher education is done in other countries.
I think the one that was really consistent during the whole time period was the importance of stepping back and taking a larger view. I felt like I had the opportunity to do that again and again at my host institution and at the different site visits that I made, and at the retreats where we really learned about higher ed. So really stepping back, looking at the big picture, thinking about things was a really important takeaway for me. So that's one. Seeing the diversity of institutions and approaches in higher ed was another part that was just absolutely amazing for me to see. I mean, intellectually I knew it, but to actually I went to over 45 campuses for site visits, and just to go to the different schools, talk to the provosts and presidents and see, on the one hand, we all have the same problems. On the other hand, we have really different ways of approaching them. So I felt like I learned a tremendous amount.
Well, I think the fact that you have to do projects were really what guided my experience. So my projects ended up kind of defining my fellowship overall. I worked on a reorganization project for my home institution. So instituting a formal chair system, and also reorganizing the provost portfolio was one of my projects that my provost had given me. So I learned a lot about academic governance and structure, which I thought would be horribly boring, especially to talk to people. But it's amazing how much people want to talk about academic governance when you get them going. So I learned a ton about governance, and through that, I think, and then implementing those on my campus, I just learned how important it is as a leader to be transparent and to be a consensus builder and to be clear in your communication, and I learned that from the people who run the Fellows Program, my fellows, as well as the emeritus professors that helped us out were immensely encouraging and helpful in that process.
I think really pursue it. I think it's a really wonderful opportunity. I think that if you do become a fellow and you go to a host institution, I think you really do need to step back and get a sense of the culture before you get too far involved in whatever your project for the year is going to be, because institutional cultures vary so much, institution by institution, that it's good to develop a really healthy appreciation for the different ways that people do things.
The biggest thing I'd say is, are they in it for the right reason? And the right reason, I think, is because you want to learn more about higher education. This is your chance to actually learn what the view is outside of the trenches and to get some idea of where we've been and where we are going.
Well, first do it, but second, don't imagine that it's something that you can expect will be handed to you in the way that an ordinary educational experience might have been when you were younger. It's really what you make of it. You'll be constructing your own agenda, your own priorities, and be given sort of keys to higher ed as a whole.
Go for it. I mean, for me, it was an experience that you can only have once in your life. It really helped clarify where I want to go, what I want to do, and it's helped me, I believe, become a better mentor for the faculty and department chairs that I serve back at Shepherd.
There's so many great things about it. It's been in place for years and years and years. It's a wonderful leadership opportunity, but you have to also take the bull by the horns and make some things happen for yourself. They're not going to do it for you.
I would say do it. Even if you don't think you're ready for it, let the Fellows Program decide, because there's a lot more that you can bring to a table, that you can bring to a leadership role than you might always realize.
My advice would be to do it, whether you do periodic placement or the full-time placement, but most importantly, pay attention to who your mentor is. Who your mentoring president is much more important than the actual institution.
My advice would be to check it out. Talk to fellows. Do not hesitate to look up former fellows. You can find them pretty easily. Shoot someone an email and say, hey, I'm looking at this program. Can you tell me about it? Talk to people at your university and see if you can get people to help you out, to sponsor you. But I would absolutely have some conversations, and the fellows are good. They'll help you figure out, are you ready? is this the time to do it? Can you make it work with your current position and your institution? We're all there to help. It's a great program, and we want to see other people be successful with it.
If you're interested in any sort of higher education administrative position, whether it's on the academic side or student side or finances, this is one of the best programs out there.
Do it. Absolutely do it. You're probably out there thinking about whether or not you should apply. There are several different options, whether you're doing periodic visits, semester-long placement, or the full year-long placement. Whatever you're considering, whatever's right for you, you won't be the same afterwards. Jump in and take the plunge. Transformational is clearly number one, and you'll hear many fellows echo that because each experience is unique to the fellow, and the second is life-changing.
Life-changing. It was just great. It was really fantastic.
It was unique and it was transformative.
First and foremost, it would be transformational. For me, this was the most transformational experience in my career. The second one would be eye-opening.
Life-changing, I mean, does not sound like a cliche, but it surely was, and just really energizing.
Life-changing. Absolutely life-changing.
Transformative and life-changing.
Transformational for sure. It's changed the way I see administration. Is fire hose two words or one?
Well, definitely transformative. That's the one that it's the easy one. It is what higher ed is, and it is what the ACE experience is. It's truly transformative.